Hey everyone, welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. Today we are going to talk about free agency a little bit more, but we're going to specifically focus on Packers free agents. It seems like, Tom Telesco used to use that Indianapolis Colts pipeline. Now it seems to be more of a Packers pipeline, whether it be Casey Hayward, Brian Balaga, Corey Linsley. So I could sit here and talk about those guys and say, oh, he did these stats, he might fit here. Or I could just bring on someone like Mike from with Game On Wisconsin, who knows more about the Packers. I was messaging him back and forth all year, like, hey, what do you think about this guy? What do you think about this guy? What do you think about this guy? And he was getting into scheme and all sorts of fit stuff. I'm like, wait, why don't I just have you come on and explain this to everybody? So, Mike, thank you for being here, man. How you doing?
Good. How you doing? Sting is kind of worn off from the game, so doing better than Saturday.
Oh man, I listen. The Chargers obviously didn't make the postseason, so I didn't have to watch them get blown up by the Bills that first week, or say obviously like you guys won and done after having that first round bye. So I got to avoid that, but I would have liked to make have the Chargers make the postseason. So let's talk about some of these free agents that could help them make the postseason this year. How they fit? Are they any good? I don't know, but let's get into it. So one of the things I want to talk about first, if I can add this to the stream. I want to talk about these free agents. And before I get into the free agents, I want to talk about the newest news out of today. That is that Nathaniel Hackett is joining the Broncos to be their head coach. So obviously, one, how are the Broncos going to fare with him as head coach? And two, we got to talk about it. What does that mean for Aaron Rodgers, do you think? What is everybody saying in the Packers circles?
It's hard to connect the dots right now. I mean, we were kind of wondering about it when Hackett started to interview for the position.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say if you can draw a direct line between Rodgers going to Denver because there's still a trade that would have to be made.
Sure.
But I think the bigger one there is who would Hackett potentially poach off of the coaching staff to join him in Denver, because you figure he would like to go with some kind of familiarity. There's a couple routes, you could see him with most recently. That would be in Green Bay's offensive room or the defensive room if he takes someone to be his coordinator on that side of the ball.
Right.
But also you have to remember he mostly the Jaguars as of like 2018 or whatever. So he has some history there. So he may go farther back, take some more guys. So on the outside looking in, so LaFleur was the play caller. So there's always that little bit of a wonder. But at the same time, I can't remember if Hackett called the plays in Jacksonville or not. So there's always that kind of a barrier to get through. How do guys who didn't call plays become either play callers, or do they find someone else who's going to be the play caller? But I think the bigger impact for Green Bay is, if he does poach someone from the Packers staff, who would he likely take that would be his OC or any coach. And the two big names that Packer fans are watching are Luke Getsy, who's our quarterback coach and has some really strong ties with Rodgers, and excuse me, and has been renowned as a quarterback whisperer of sorts. And
Sure.
Rodgers kind of credits with helping him get back on track after a couple down years in 2018 and 2019. And then the other one would be Adam Stenavich. Honestly, I think that would be the bigger one, and we'll kind of get into that as we go through the free agents. One in particular you've listed, but Stenavich is a name that no one really has heard of. So a little bit of like the Cliff Notes background. He has Packers ties. Before he was our O-line coach, he was in training camp like 2008 or something. Let's just throw a date out there. Somewhere in that time. But he spent a training camp in Green Bay, and then he bounced around as a quality control coach. I think right before Green Bay, he was San Fran's assistant O-line or offensive QC coach and stuff. And then Green Bay brought him in to replace James Campen. And he has done nothing but really work. Like Green Bay gets a lot of, it remains to be seen how much is Rodgers, what the balance is between Rodgers' manipulation of the pocket versus how much those individual O-line players are doing on their own. But you can't have one without the, good O-line play doesn't come from just one. It can't survive that way. And Campen, he last year he had a full deck, or not Campen, I'm sorry, Stenavich. Last year he had a full deck. He had 3 All-Pros left to right with Bakhtiari, Jenkins, and Corey Linsley, who is with the Chargers and has just been phenomenal the past 2 seasons. But then this year, he had Jenkins for 2 games and then I think 6 parts of 6 games after that, before he got an ACL tear in week 11, and didn't have Bakhtiari except for 27 snaps on the season. And in their place, they had some turnover on the O-line, but he basically had everyone who stepped in ready to go, playing, from an relatively unknown third-year undrafted free agent who I banged the table for purely because he's a monster athlete.
Nice.
If you guys go by RAS scores, Yosh Nijman, he's a 10
Wow.
on the RAS score. Just an incredible dancing bear of a man. But the work that they've put in on him has finally panned out. And then just getting John Runyon Jr. back on his feet after a rough preseason. So that would be the one that, in terms of coaching, I would hope LaFleur would try and retain him. And I think he would be able to, because you didn't hear Stanovic's name mentioned with a bunch of the other hires. Like Getsy was actually there like the day after the interview with Denver after Hackett. So that would be the more linear line. And if, for instance, Getsy goes, Getsy would have been the ideal candidate to replace Hackett as the OC, but you could see the potential for LaFleur to elevate Stanovic into that OC position, kind of be OC run game coordinator, and then his assistant, NFL circles be small as they are. Stanovic's assistant O-line coach, who they would probably elevate to O-line coach, is Dick Butkus' nephew. So,
oh, no kidding. Okay.
Circles be small, and that's kind of the route they go. But circling all the way back to Rodgers, I think, it's one of those that it's too hard to draw a direct line kind of thing. There's definitely smoke. How black the smoke is, I can't really tell you, because, like I said, there still has to be a trade that would have to be made. Thing is like, okay, Green Bay would be shedding Rodgers' salary, but would looking to be getting back not just draft picks, but I think you would want something tangible back, immediately tangible, whether that's like a Judy or, those are discussions for people with way more know-how and way up in the pay grade to know. But you'd be expecting to see like one, maybe two, like one high-end already young player, one with like, on the verge of starters potential, and then like a couple draft picks. Like that's the kind of return you'd be looking to get, because anything less, you're like, I've seen ones where they're like, oh, you get 3 first-round picks and stuff like that, and I could see them doing that. But I think the front office would look to get something tangible to help the team stay competitive.
Right.
But then again, that could all be totally moot, because LaFleur, as early as Monday, was saying like they already have a path that they're going to basically keep as much of this core together. I'm really interested to see, who makes that list, what moves are on that list and stuff. But I think when it all comes said and done, I'm happy for Hackett, but I'm thinking he's going to be using Bridgewater or Locke as his placeholder quarterback, and he's going to get to have his pick of the litter to, I know it's not the greatest quarterback class this year, so maybe it'll be a 2-year bridge, but I mean, that should be more job security for Hackett in his new going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really hope that offensive line or assistant offensive line coach does not make the jump to Denver, because the problems that Denver has had are quarterback, and I think an offensive line. I think that if they improve both of those things with that defense, it's a scary team. So hopefully he does not make that jump, because the Packers, you guys are just always have a great offensive line, but really recently, just the way that Jenkins could move in and out, and the way you guys had moving pieces,
it's unbelievable. It's just absolutely amazing. Unbelievable. Like, I don't think the average fan understands what goes into it. Like, one of our former all-time great O-linemen, Josh Sitton, he had one of the best terms descriptions of it, and he said, people asked like, oh, like how come it looked hard for you to move, and he goes, let me just put it this way. It's like when you take a dump and for whatever reason you can't use the hand you normally use, you're using your other hand. He said, start there and then just make it 10 times harder than that, and you've got the basic that's the guidelines you're working with.
Yeah, no, I've never had to block a 350-pound defensive tackle while wiping with the other hand before, so I imagine that's very difficult. All right, let's get into these free agents, because I mean, I think there are a lot of free agents that could fit with the Chargers, but you'll talk about specifically those fits. So the first one I want to talk about, before I get into it, just because people don't know, I have composite rankings for these things. So just real quick, if they're green, they're young. If they're highlighted in yellow, they're middle age for a player. And then red, they're 30 years or older. Doesn't mean I don't like them if they're in red, just indicates the age. And the emphasis, of course, on per play stats, so forced incompletion percentage, drop rate, yards after the catch per reception, that sort of thing. So the first one I want to talk about is Rasul Douglas, a guy that really came into his own this year. I personally did not know a whole lot about him before this season. I really don't know much about him now, but when I was putting together these composite rankings, he was top 5 in every single category. And to me, that's kind of a big deal. And one of the things that was missing for the Chargers so much last year is they just didn't have guys get their hands on the football enough, or they didn't come away with an interception. They had Derwin James, I believe, was top 3 in missed or dropped interceptions, I believe. Nasir Adderley, plenty of opportunities, did not come down with the football. The Chargers just weren't giving Justin Herbert on that offense enough extra drives per game, something that I think the Chiefs seem to be better at mostly, but the Chargers just couldn't do it. Everyone was wondering, the Chargers, if they're so good on offense, why aren't they scoring more points? They just didn't have enough drives. I mean, I think before the final game of the year, they were the best offense in terms of touchdown scoring percentage, but they weren't scoring as many points because they just didn't get the ball back enough. Part of that is special teams issues, but also part of that's the defense. And I think the Chargers really could look to find a guy in the secondary to take the ball away, who's good at taking the ball away. So, talk about Rasul Douglas. How did he shine for this team? How did he just improve so quickly for the team? And do you think he's a fit for the Chargers and specifically Brandon Staley's defense?
Yeah, so kind of the looking just big macro level picture here. So Joe Barry, Packers DC.
Oh yeah,
the inside linebackers under Staley when they were both in the Rams system last year. So there's a level of familiarity with that. And Barry runs a similar system, not quite the same, but very similar in ideals, where it's a lot of zone, a lot of cover 2, split safety, cover 4, eyes on the quarterback, and that's where Douglas shines in his ability. Because he came out, I believe it was 2017, so he has a ring. Actually, he was on that Eagles roster that beat the Patriots. He's one of those. You look at him; he's a tall, lanky quarterback. But he. I think the problems that he ran into at his previous stops, so that's part of the story, is like Green Bay was technically his 5th team this season, because he was released by the Panthers, then he signed with Oakland, released by Oakland, went somewhere else, and then ended up on the Cardinals practice squad, and then because of the injuries to Jair Alexander and Kevin King, Brian Gutekunst. And so the ultimate irony there is Rasul Douglas is signing. If you took the poll on how people thought of him when we signed him versus how he ended up, he was a wet fart in the wind when we signed him, because that was literally 2 days after all the rumors linked us to Stephon Gilmore, when the Patriots were about to let loose Stephon Gilmore, blah, blah, blah. And like Gilmore, I think he still had a decent season, but he missed like 2/3 of the games or something like that. I didn't really keep an eye on him after he ended up in Carolina, but Douglas was more or less ready to go about a week after he got here, just needed to integrate into the system. And honestly, I think he would be a really good signing with the Chargers, because, like I said, starts off with scheme familiarity. Barry, Staley, there's a lot to like between how the two of them play, especially with their corners. And Douglas was made to play cover 2, cover 4, because you have a long, lanky athlete. He's a good athlete. He's a good NFL athlete, not an elite one by any means, but he knows how to maximize his length to make himself a more than viable quarterback. I know people ask, like, is he a CB1, CB2? He's probably more of a 2, because he is going to need. He's not matchup proof. He's going to need help in certain situations, but that's where Derwin, Nas, that's where having those two is just dynamite, because Douglas had a quote, I think it was after they played the Rams, actually, where they asked him, like, how do you make all these plays? And he basically came out and said, like, every once in a while, I call my shot and I let Jesus take the post. Worked for him this year. There was I think there was one double move that OBJ beat him for, like a 50-yard touchdown, but there's not many corners who are going to stay with OBJ on a double move anyway. Right. So, and so what you're getting with Douglas is you're getting a guy who, just to put it out there for fans. I know a lot of fans, a lot of, especially the guys who played Madden, came up playing Madden, and that's how they know. A lot of people like to play bump and run and no
Sure.
airspace for the receivers. Douglas is going to play 5 yards off because
Okay.
he is accounting for his, relative to players against them, relative mitigating explosiveness. So he's gonna, he's gonna play his matchup, but he's gonna make concessions for himself. But he has supreme confidence in his ability to come forward and either make a play on the ball with his ball skills and his arm length, or he's going to just make a really secure tackle. And you've seen that all over the place this season. Obviously with the multiple pick sixes that he had on the season, and just you see some plays every now and then. Like I think one of them was earlier in that Rams game where he just literally reached around the receiver on a dig route. He was boxed out, but because he's tall and lanky and long for a corner, he just reached right around the receiver and batted the ball down. So those are the kind of things that should appeal very highly to a cover 2 heavy scheme, because he hits, he's going to tackle well, and he's very assignment sure. And like I said, he's going to gamble every once in a while, but he's making calculated decisions and stuff. And so he's looking at the other side. Yes, he's a 1-year wonder. How many of those guys have we seen before and stuff? I do think there's a bit of scheme compatibility where it comes to why he looks so much better this year. Like I said earlier, he was born to play in a cover 2, cover 4 style system where his eyes are always, it's that old adage of like eyes on your man and the quarterback, and he does that so well. I think Philly was in that weird like cover 3 man system, so that's why they have Darius Slay there now, because he's one of the better man coverage corners. But that's not who Douglas is. He's not going to survive that way. And then Carolina runs that 3-3-5, which has a lot of college coverage basis on it. So he's playing a lot of like bail cover 3 and stuff like that, and that's not where he's going to excel, because of his length. It's he needs to chop his feet a little more to come up if he's in a bail technique kind of thing. So whereas in a cover 2 or cover 4, he's trying to stay square so he can trigger and come up on a play and stuff. So you see he just looks so aggressive and confident, and I think that helps it. Usually you hear 1-year wonder and you're kind of I don't like that. But if you look at what he does in this scheme, there's a lot to like about how he matches up. And quite honestly, like, he's a guy that I hope he gets his due, because he saved so many games this season. And one of the ones that that Chargers fans should get to know if he does sign with them that he's good at is they call it what is it called? It's like the tug technique or whatever. So you're in phase usually on an in breaking route, and you'll kind of reach around. You'll kind of have your hand tight on the guy's back hip. Yeah. And when the ball comes in, you'll slightly tug him so you can undercut. And that's really how he got the interception on. That's how he got that game-winning interception against the Browns and stuff. And it's one of those where you're taking advantage of the rules, because not taking advantage, but you're playing to the rules, because there is no real chance for DPI if the receiver engages first, and that's where Douglas can win, because most corners are like skinny, like they have to be agile and stuff, whereas Douglas is a bigger guy. He's like 6'2", 205 or something like that. So he can muscle receivers, and but he has enough requisite athleticism to stay with guys, and a lot better than I thought he would. I thought he would get beat on more in-breaking routes, but I think because he's so good at reading route combinations and his football IQ is really high, he's good at playing anticipatory, but also not taking too many chances. He plays the down and distance really well, and just is really good in a football situational sense.
Wow, that sounds incredible. That was a fantastic answer. I mean, you covered everything possible, and you're kind of selling me. I don't watch a lot of Packers football. I apologize, but coming up with this composite ranking and seeing it's like, well, I got to know more about this guy. You just did everything possible, and I think anyone listening could be sold on that. And the Chargers, what they do at corner, put Samuel Jr. inside, outside, rotate them. I don't know. I guess the only other question I have for Rasul Douglas is he's primarily on the outside, right? There's no
yes.
Okay.
They supposedly we're tinkering with him as maybe a tight end matchup kind of guy and stuff, but
Okay.
it's always hard to see. It's always hard to tell with the taller, lankier guys on the inside. Usually, it's got to be someone like a Derwin who's just a superb athlete all
Yeah.
around, where you don't
Right.
worry about him getting their feet crossed up. And even Derwin, it's just gonna happen. That's just the how it goes at the position. You're playing tendencies, and you're playing a lot of it's all read and react. There's no sugarcoating. That it is the most literal translation of skills for what's needed at the position. So he could do it, and it would be a lot of where kind of like how Revis would do it on the perimeter, where he would basically walling off a side kind of thing, and just being
Okay.
like playing the receiver to his help. So
Hmm.
he'd be forcing slots to play inside if he has inside linebacker presence, or if the inside linebackers are blitzing, he would be forcing them to the perimeter where he can use the sideline and stuff. So I think in the right situation it would work, but I think more what you would see is allowing you to have kind of matchup flexibility, so that you could run with, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, Rasul and Mike Davis on the perimeter, and maybe put in Asante Samuel Jr. on in the interior to match up against quicker slots, or if they have whatever matchups, he can play on the perimeter, and you let Derwin come into the box or something like that.
Sure.
So it
Hmm.
just gives you flexibility. And the only other thing that I noticed this year is Green Bay plays sides a lot. So he was
Mm.
our right quarterback. So if you're thinking of a right-handed quarterback, he's to his left, because
Gotcha.
they flip sides. The sides are oriented differently. It's
Right.
from point of view and stuff. So he was primarily on the offense's left, but I
Hmm.
think in Carolina he mixed it up a little bit. But I do believe he mostly played on the right quarterback position too. But don't quote me on that. Green Bay, he was primarily the right quarterback.
No, I'll take your word for it. You are a walking encyclopedia right now on Rasul Douglas, so I appreciate all that. All right, let's move on from the skill positions to a big hog. That's Mr. Dennis Kelly, another guy who's only been with you guys for 1 year. Talk about what he did in 2020 with the Tennessee Titans, 30th in pass blocking efficiency, only allowing 26 pressures and no sacks, playing all 16 games. It seems like he had, I think, a knee injury, but they didn't force him to miss any games, just some practice time. But then for you guys, only 5 regular season games. I know he was only in there for the one game against San Francisco, but this year in 5 games, only 4 pressures allowed and 1 sack allowed, second in the league in pass blocking efficiency. To me, that's pretty solid. And listen, right now, we just dealt with Storm Norton, who gave up the most pressures in the NFL, 78th in pass blocking efficiency, gave up 60 pressures and 9 sacks. So someone like Kelly, who in 2020 gave up 26 pressures and no sacks, and blocked for a guy who rushed for 2,000 yards. That sounds all right for us. So talk to me about Dennis Kelly. Where does he fit? Do you think it's going to be an easy transition for him? And how did he really save the offensive line for you guys this year?
Yeah, so Kelly is just another one of the, like everyone was shooting flack at Gutekunst this year, but there's one thing that he's done every year since he took over in 2018. He has drafted and signed an O lineman in free agency every year. So,
Smart.
and then in the last 2 years, he's taken 3 O linemen each year.
Wow.
Just as a couple of the guys that I look up to in the Packers community, one of them being Owen Reese, he said, "Show me a good team that's not strong up front." I mean,
Hmm.
having to play
Yeah.
4 guards is literally what lost Kansas City the Super Bowl last year. And
Yeah.
Gutekunst has made it his mission that O-line is going to be his priority, whether it's to block for Rodgers or it's to set up whoever, whether it be Love or whoever the contingency is going forward in the
Hmm.
future. O-line is going to be that position that's like, we're just going to put someone behind that O-line and it's going to be strong. Kelly, so we cut Kelly, I think, in like week 3 of the preseason. He was
Okay.
a late release by Tennessee, and I think it was kind of a salary cut move for them, but
Hmm.
basically we signed him as a street veteran minimum free agent.
Yeah.
Sat on the roster for the first 3 months of the season. I, at a bunch of times, joked like, okay, maybe he'll be cut here and there because we have other positions
Yeah.
of need. And the one thing with Kelly is that he is what's called in the scouting community a right tackle only. And those
Yeah.
guys don't carry the same inherent value as anybody. So, like, for instance, on the Packers, the guy that Kelly was backing up all year is Billy Turner, who we signed to be a guard, but
Oh.
also has the ability to bump out to tackle. So,
Hmm.
that's one of the things with O-line is that you're looking for guys that are either definitely going to be starters or who can provide positional flexibility to back up multiple positions. But if you're going to be a one position guy, you've got to be damn good at what you do. And Kelly, yes, he struggled against San Fran in the playoff game, but really he kept us from supreme disaster when he came into the game. So Turner got injured in week 14 against the Bears. Kind of really unfortunate play. Yosh was playing left tackle. Robert Quinn beat him with an inside move, and Yosh was just trying to push Quinn past the pocket. But when he shoved him, Quinn went right into Turner's left knee, and he had some kind of an MCL sprain. But he was able to come back for the playoff game. But Kelly stepped in, and against a very good Bears front. Obviously, no Khalil Mack that game, but that's still a very talented and stout defensive front for the Bears. Kelly gave up no pressures, and I think had like one negative run play and stuff. And it's really impressive for a guy who's 6'8". Like you don't see too many. You want taller guys at tackle, but 6'7" is usually as tall as they get because generally then those guys can't bend, they can't move well laterally and stuff like that. And Kelly, he played really well, and this is where a lot of Packers fans are going to play revisionist history and stuff. But I know that O-line struggled in the playoffs, but there were a lot of people who were saying that Turner shouldn't get his job back when he came back from his injury on the COVID list because Kelly had graded out, smaller sample size, but he had been grading out better than Turner had before he got hurt. So it's one of those, Dan, it's like you can't take it back kind of thing and stuff. But as far as the Chargers go, so Kelly is on the older side, like you said. He's I think he's turning 31 or 32 this year. But like you said, you're looking for someone reliable and that's a stopgap player. And I believe he's been pretty healthy the last three of the last 4 seasons or whatever. I can't remember if it was the year before. So 2019 season or the 2018 season, one of them hit a fluke injury and he missed like pretty much the whole season. But otherwise, he's been pretty healthy his career. And so in that instance, you're looking at a guy that, you should be able to kind of plug and play on the right side. I do think Lombardi utilizes a lot of the similar schemes that LaFleur likes to run, a lot of zone, inside or stretch zone. Kelly's not a man mover. He's big, but because he's at a leverage disadvantage in the run game, he's more going to just swallow up guys than really blow people off the ball. And honestly, that's fine. As long as, Green Bay's attitude has been recently is that they take tackles and they turn them into guards. Sometimes it's worked phenomenally. You get a Josh Sitton every once in a while. And other times you're going to get guys who are more positional blockers in the run game, but you're going to prioritize pass blocking every time. And that's where Kelly, he's just huge. And even if he's at something of a speed disadvantage at times, just being big and being nimble enough to protect the corner, he's good at running guys past the quarterback. And so looking at it that way, that's where you, as a front office, you would look into, okay, Justin, you've had this propensity to wait for the big play, keep dropping back. We need you to start jumping up through the B gap and, making defenses make decisions kind of thing. I feel like we saw him start to do that as the season went on. My brother-in-law was a proponent of that for a long time. And he's just like, just run. And then just slide, please. I think Kelly, another heady veteran, like I said, with Rasul, obviously a little longer in the tooth, but I don't think he would cost too much, honestly, because like I said, while he played well for us down the stretch, had a little bit of a rough last game, and front offices tend to do that where it's like, what have you done for me lately? And, what's the last thing you put on film and stuff. But honestly, it's one where I think the Chargers would be good to go for it. And some will say like, but he's not the top. You're not looking for the top. Green Bay fans had a similar reaction to Turner signing 3 years ago, where it was like, you paid $8 million for a guard, and we're going through a similar situation. So, like you said, Norton was the worst graded right tackle in the league. Green Bay at the time that we signed Turner in 2019, everyone was like, you signed a league average guard for $8 million a year? I was like, we had the worst right guard play the season before. League
exactly.
Is an immense upgrade. And that's where advanced stats kind of hurt the average fan because all they're seeing is numbers. And it's like, you don't understand the jump that's made between the absolute league worst player and even a league average. We hear the word average and it's like, can't we do better than that? you have to remember how much better you're doing than the year before. And you wouldn't be looking to pay Kelly a super big deal. You'd be looking at
Right.
like a, putting it in basketball terms, you'd be looking at one of those like 2 year that's really a 1 year, or a 3 year that's really a
Right.
2 year kind of deal and stuff, where you're paying him up front to be our right tackle for 1 or 2 years kind of thing. And then, hey, like, we're in the meantime, we're trying to find some young stud to take over the reins for you. And I do think he would provide a lot of stability to that offensive line. It's such a damn shame that Bulaga hasn't worked out for you guys. I, I was so happy that he got paid and stuff. And trust me, Chargers fans, I'm not just sugarcoating it because I like the guy or not, but if he could play, he would. That guy has literally tore the bone off of his own hip because he tried to catch himself to keep playing in a game. He's played through, or he's recovered from 2 ACLs. One that he came back in like 8 months from, between the 2017 and 2018 seasons. And I just hate to see that his body is finally like giving out on him, because he's given it all to the game, and he's just the first rate. All the people that I've known who met him, they all say he's one of the nicest guys. Brian Balaga Awa. But yeah, like I'm really glad the Lindsley pickup has worked out. And honestly, this wouldn't be the same kind of level, because I think Lindsley, centers can play a long time, just kind of like Hardwick played for a long time for you guys. I think Lindsley could last a while, whereas Kelly, this would be more of that stopgap. Let's find the guy in the next 2 years and get him. So, like, for instance, depending on whichever way the Chargers decide to go, but if they get like a Trevor Penning in the first round, or one of the top tackle prospects in the second round, then those are guys that like Penning. For Penning's instance, he's a guy from a lower level of competition. There's
exactly.
I like his film, but there are some technique things to work out. And having a guy like Kelly, you're not forced to play a rookie who, he can make some plays, but also he's building some bad habits, because it's like, hey, I'm young, I can move, I can do this, this, and this to just beat guys to spots, and I'm gonna, whether he's flying open with his outside foot and leaving himself susceptible to inside moves, or just not having good hand punch technique. The coaching staff can work all of that out while you have a wily veteran out there to do what needs to be done to get the job done out there. So I think. So like I said, going in terms of free agency, so Kelly shouldn't break the bank, because like I said, he's kind of coming off, like, he still has 2 stigmas where like his last game wasn't great, and okay, you just got cut by your last game in training camp, so it's like you got cut for. And even if it is like we cut him, even if Tennessee were to come out and say like, oh, we cut him for salary cap reasons, it's like, well, you saw the guy you put there instead, and we think Kelly's better, so what's up? And so there's all those kind of things. Like, I think one of the things to get to fans is like, front offices are so smart sometimes that they're dumb, because they make decisions that you're kind of like, you didn't draft this guy because he doesn't have a real position, but he can rush from anywhere. Like, what? So like, it's those kind of things and stuff. So, but those are the ones where it's like, okay, like, you're not expecting Dennis Kelly to get like a Trent Williams or a Bakhtiari, nowhere near that, and not even like a starting right tackle. You're like, you've got this guy who's older, pigeonholed into literally one position on the O-line. That helps keep his price down. And from the thing that's kind of like helpful in the Chargers' perspective, is you can say like, you're going to be our starting right tackle from day one, no questions asked. Like, you basically have to beat out whatever rookie or Norton or Pipkins. Like, you've got 3 guys you've literally got to beat out. We're pretty damn sure you're going to beat 2 of them out. And, unless someone random falls in the first round, pretty sure you're probably going to beat that rookie anyway. So that's where kind of the appeal that, sort of the schmoozing the Chargers can do is like, I don't know how many people play NCAA football, but it's like the whole, like, we can promise you early playing time kind of thing. Like, like those talks do go on between players and agents, or teams and agents and stuff like that. So that's definitely something that the Chargers can throw out there too, as like a sort of the sweet in the pot, not even necessarily to drop his cap hit or anything, but just to say like, hey, like, this is what we can do kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked to Ode Abuji, and he kind of said the same thing about them playing, talking to him about playing right guard. It's like, yeah, you get the playing time. We respect your film. So we're kind of going to hand you the job. We'll say it's a competition, but really, like, you had the job the entire way through. So, I mean, that obviously worked out minus the injury. But yeah, Dennis
Yeah.
Kelly, the whole situation just seems to be perfect for me. It's going to be inexpensive. He's going to be the right tackle. They need a right tackle. And like you said, if we're expecting Trent Williams, who just had one of the greatest tackle seasons of all time, not going to happen. But if we can get a guy who does better than the worst in the league and is about, halfway in the middle, that sounds great. I think a lot of the guys in the draft, just watching some of the, like Penning, he's got to make that switch to the right side. He had 19 penalties called on him this year. This level of competition wasn't all that great, obviously. Falele is just learning how to play the position. Raymond is learning how to play the position as well. There's not a Rashawn Slater right there. There's not even really a Christian Darrisaw right there. A lot of these guys, there's some question marks where in a year, maybe even halfway through the season, if something happens to Kelly, they can maybe, play pretty well there. But there's just a lot of guys with question marks. There's no real Rashawn Slater, even though we're only picking 4 picks later. There's just no guy like that for the Chargers at that spot. So someone like Kelly sounds perfect for me. So yeah, I'm all for it, really. Let's jump to the next guy, a guy that you were very high on, I believe. I think I asked you about him.
Is my boy.
Yeah, so I asked you about him for fantasy football purposes, and it didn't quite work out this year. So we'll talk about that. Just right off the bat, the three things that I have highlighted here are things that the Chargers are really looking for, and that's yards after the catch per reception, not dropping the football, and just being explosive, yards per reception, and him being third in yards after the catch per reception among free agents. First in drop rate, which being a good thing, not a bad thing in this case. And then yards per reception being first among free agents. I think that's exactly what the Chargers are looking for. Now, I know Aaron Rodgers says wherever he goes, if he goes anywhere, he wants MVS to go with him. But just going through these composite rankings, I like doing this because it seems to find a guy that's kind of hidden on a per play basis. You don't know, where these guys are at. You think the best guys are the best guys, but not always necessarily. And I think that makes sense. Adams is number 1. So I think it worked out. Godwin 2, Williams 3. I think that kind of makes sense. But MVS showing up at number 4 is actually pretty cool. And I think, Jalen Guyton, who's already on the list too, boxed in red here. I think he's a solid player for the Chargers to bring back. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but you just get a little bit more of a bump in yards after the catch per reception. You're going to get a guy with better hands, at least in terms of drop rate. You get a guy that just be a little bit more explosive. So, talk to me about how you felt about him going into this year, what he means for the Packers. Is he kind of that yards after catch guy? Can he work? I think in particular, can he work like the screen game or quick game? Or is he more of I'm going to catch the ball down the field and then also take it, 30 yards for a touchdown? Talk to me about his role this year, what he fits in, where he could fit in with the Chargers, and then, just why it didn't quite go so well this year and a little bit of a drop off from last year to this one.
Yeah. So the biggest reason for the drop off this year is just injuries. So got off to a slow start. Rodgers was missing. If you watch that Detroit game, he had him for 3 touchdowns basically, and he overthrew him every time, kind of thing. So, and then the week after, he was having a really good game against the 49ers in week 3, and then he pulls his hammy late in the game, and that put him on IR, and he missed 5 or 6 weeks after that, as they tried to just get him back slowly to make sure that hamstring wasn't a long-term issue. Had a couple quiet games coming back, then had the big game against Minnesota where he had the game time touchdown late on over route. And then had a really good game against the Ravens, and then right after that got COVID and just was kind of in and out of the lineup, and then had a back injury in week 17. And so big picture, his impact on the offense is immense because he is the only legit speed threat that they have on the roster. They have other guys who are good, really good athletes, like Equanimeous St. Brown is one, but none of them are the kind of speed deep threat that Marquez brings to the table. And so if you look at Green Bay's stats, I think they're one of the top scoring offense. They average 30 points a game with him in the lineup. And without him, they're somewhere under close to or under 20 or something like that.
Wow.
It was just kind of a slog because, as great as Devontae is, he's not a deep threat. He's winning with separation, pristine route running, and excellent hands. And this compound, losing Valdes-Scantling compounded with losing Tonyan, you lost both of your speed, deep threats and speed threats that, are going to force defenses to play deeper coverage and stuff. When you lose both of them, you allow teams to compress their coverage and not let you get those intermediate routes. That was part of the struggles for them later in the game is once they were after that first drive against San Francisco, and San Fran's okay, I guess we will do the thing where we bracket Devontae and won't let him just beat us singly.
Yeah, makes sense.
You just saw that Green Bay struggled to separate, and that was just because everyone was just squatting on top of him. Everything is short, and they just struggled to adjust to that. Scantling, so he has really just incredibly progressed himself as a receiver throughout his career. Is he perfect? No. Certain things are never going to be his forte. This year was really his first year with, in terms of great drop percentage as a receiver. He's had dropsy problems throughout his career.
Gotcha.
That's honestly one of the reasons why I've backed him so much, is because not that I'm anywhere near the athlete that he is, but he reminds me a lot of myself when I played in high school, where
Cool.
he seems to be a great guy, gives full effort, all that kind of stuff. But just every once in a while, he has a case of the dropsies. Like, if you go and look at our week 1 game against Minnesota last year, I think he had like 100 yards and a touchdown and 2 like 40-yard completions, but he also had dropped like another 80 yards worth of passes and stuff. So, you're going to have those. This year, I think, his catch percentage was somewhere over 90% or something like that. And part of his target completion ratio is because Rodgers just couldn't hit him on the right side worth a damn this year. Like, if you go back and chart every right side throw, he's just kind of throwing up prayer balls sometimes, and they just weren't even close. Like, half of them were out of bounds, and half of them were like 5 yards too far, which is funny to hear when you're talking about a guy with 4.37 speed. But Scantling really did. Valdes-Scantling, he really made the most of his opportunities this year, and he's just tried to improve himself as a receiver every year. They do use him on the short screens. They'll use him on those smoke routes where, he just turns to the quarterback and it's up to him to try and beat a guy. It's not the best thing he does, but he is 6'4" and, can use his length to, he's good at knowing where the sticks are. And so, like, they used him on a couple of those this year where he literally turned, saw the corner was coming, and just stuck the ball out. And was like, okay, I got smoked, but I got a first down kind of thing and stuff. So that's always good to see. And the other part of the game where I don't think he gets nearly enough credit, partially because Lazard just takes all the adulation there, is he's a really good blocker in the both the receiving game and then the run game. So, like, the play that exemplifies that is from last year, actually. It's the Eagles game. He had a bad drop to open the second half, and I think that was right after, too, he had the fumble against the Colts where everyone was like, oh, I can't believe he did that, even though he was a big reason they got to overtime in that game. But late in the game, the Packers are only up a score, and Jones breaks a run for like 70-something yards, and Scantling is there the whole day with Jones to escort him down the field. And that's the kind of effort you want to see out of your secondary receiving options. Like they always say, big plays in the passing game, the first 20 to 30 yards are just the quarterback and the initial receiver, and anything more than that, it's some kind of downfield blocking or whatever kind of thing. So he shows really good effort in all phases of the game. His yards per completion is because he's a deep threat. And this is where it's hard to gauge what his free agency is going to look like, because speed kills. Teams are always looking for speed. At the same time, he's the greatest contested catch guy. And you'll see him on certain plays where you're like, oh, I wish he dove. Like, I think if he dove, he would have gotten a hand on it kind of thing and stuff. And I don't criticize guys for that too much, because if knowing how you play the position, there's a lot of time where you're tracking it and you're like, I'm not going to get there. And then you see it bounce and you're kind of crap. like you're in your head, you're doing what fans do. You're like, oh, if I laid out for it and stuff like that, maybe I'm there kind of thing and stuff. And then in certain situations, you'll see him pluck the ball out of the air in traffic. One of them was his touchdown against Baltimore this year, where he catches the ball at like the 5-yard line on a slant, and he Superman stretches and gets into the end zone. He flashes that, but actually looking back on it, he's always been a decent slant guy, actually. They just don't use him there a lot. But if you go back to 2019, he has some decent, he has some good highlights of that early in the season before he hurt his ankle. And then the past 2 years, they just, it's all role and productiveness. And that's the thing, is that with, if he were to sign with LA, he's doing the same thing. He's going to be a deep threat to open everything up for Keenan, for whatever tight end, and for Eckler. Like it's kind of, you're just sort of changing the names from Adams and Jones slash Dillon to Keenan and Eckler. So similar role. Not quite the same offense, but an offense that we've seen New Orleans use a deep threat, just to take the top off of defense. And um, Herbert throwing the ball downfield is a little different than Drew Brees throwing the ball downfield. So yeah, um, definitely another good fit. Really don't want to see it go, but that's the thing too. Is I'm sure some people will be questioning, like, won't Green Bay want to keep a lot of these guys? Green Bay is up against the cap right now. They're 40 million over. They're gonna have to, whether it, like I said earlier, LaFleur said that they have a plan to keep everybody. It's not going to happen. They're going to make concessions, and they're going to be kind of like the Saints do, where every year you're like, they're 30 million over, they're 40 million, no, they're 60 million over, and somehow they still sign one free agent and keep Cam Jordan and a bunch of really good defenders on that team. But it's going to be similar to that, where it's like, we're going to lose guys, we're going to keep some guys. And so just kind of reviewing, of these three guys, Valdes-Scantling is the one that I would say would most likely be retained, because we don't have another speed guy. Whereas with Douglas, we'd love to keep him, but you do have Stokes, you have Jair coming back from a shoulder injury, so you have your perimeter quarters set really for the Packers. And that's the thing, is like, everyone says put Jair in the slot. They weren't doing that when Jair was healthy. Like they've every one of the last 3 years, they've kind of talked about, is that a possibility? And it's kind of been shut down immediately. Like there's so much premium on a guy being able to just take away one side of the field and
absolutely
playing the matchups and stuff. So that's where we'd love to have Rasul back, but they're going to roll with the young guy. Both Jair and Stokes, obviously being a rookie, are younger than Douglas, so they're going to go with youth and try to figure out their nickel position. Same thing with Kelly. There's a chance of it, but seeing that Turner probably will be back, and they more likely just kind of renegotiate something with Turner, whether it's an extension or something, and then they do have some viable option. You're banking on Bakhtiari being fully healthy for next season, and then you have Yosh who can swing between the two positions, and then you'd still have Turner at right tackle. So that's where Kelly is a little bit more easily attainable, and Green Bay would probably draft another tackle prospect anyway. Whereas Marquez, there's not that same answer readily available on the roster, and we just saw how much his not being there just impacted the team immensely in the playoff game. So of the three so far, he's the one that would be the hardest to see going, depending on what other moves they make, kind of thing. Now, obviously, there's certain order of operations in terms of moves that have to be made, but Marquez is a guy that I would more likely see them keep than the other two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the Chargers are kind of in the same boat, where they would actually just keep Jalen Guyton, I think, or they have 11 picks in the draft, and they could use one of them on a sort of similar threat. I kind of like the idea of a proven guy that might be on a slight discount, but like you said, he's probably sticking around with the Packers. But it is worth checking out, because if for some reason they move on from Mike Williams, he's not going to be that Mike Williams role at all, but they may go draft another big body sort of guy, and sign someone like Marquez. So possibly we'll see. All right, so the next guy we talk about injured players. Unfortunately, Robert Tonyan also got hurt. He is, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th on their composite rankings. But that's mostly because he didn't have much of a year. But for the most part, I think he's a good tight end. Obviously, last year with 11 touchdowns, I think didn't he have a rushing touchdown too, if I'm not mistaken?
No, I think he had a shovel pass touchdown or something like that. It was close. It was like really close.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Chargers are looking for a tight end. I think at this point, there's only one on the roster, and that's Trey McKitty. And I think he had 3 or 4 catches this year, and is more right now the inline blocking tight end. Donald Parham, you'd like to have him back, but he had that concussion that we all saw on primetime. Steven Anderson is more of a fullback, H-back sort of guy at this point, and is not on the roster either. So we'll see who they bring back. But the Chargers, I think, are in the market for a tight end somewhere, particularly a receiving tight end. They had, Parham, McKitty, be their kind of their inline blockers, and they could also, catch the football. Anderson being their fullback, but they really kind of need a guy who can just be that receiving tight end. I don't think Parham is quite that tight end one yet as a receiver. I think he's a really good weapon for the team. I just don't know if you can trust him to be like that full-time receiving, moving around the field tight end. Not that Jared Cook is the best option either, but you could tell like they had that Jared Cook option where he was that receiving tight end. So, where does Tonyan kind of fit with the Chargers, if at all? What do you think of him? I personally don't know a lot of him other than what he did in fantasy football last year. So, talk to me about Tonyan. Could he be a receiving tight end for the Chargers? And is he a good fit? Because I think they're looking for a yards after the catch sort of guy with the tight end group. And, is that Tonyan? Can he kind of be that for them? What do you think?
So Tonyan's game, he's what I would call like a complementary weapon kind of thing.
Okay.
So he definitely maximized his opportunities last 2020 season. And then you kind of saw like what happened when this year where teams sort of started to count for him a little better. A lot of his touchdowns the previous year were kind of the where someone else was sort of the decoy on a play, and he's the guy that kind of gets lost in coverage. He does have a good sense of how to uncover versus zone. He has the speed to get up the seam. We'll see how he comes back from the knee injury. The one thing that kind of came apparent this year, two things, I guess, that came apparent this year is in terms of his ability to separate is he's a much better threat when he comes from an inline position. And it's because a lot of times defenses, like I said, NFL, there's a lot of there's a lot of innovation and stuff, but teams tend to stick with certain trends and sort of like legacies 2 times past in the game and stuff. So one of them that you kind of see is that when defenses see an inline tight end, they're going to line up a linebacker on him. Like they're kind of just like, it's a block, that's a blocker, and we're going to count for him as a box player kind of thing.
Right.
So that's where Tonyan, it's not as pronounced as like Travis Kelce's, where like if you line up a linebacker over him, he's gonna kill you, and if you put a DB on him, he looks mortal kind of thing. But there was a distinction between like Tonyan's effectiveness when he's in a 3-point stance on the end line, or if he's out in a 2-point stance, because he has speed, but he doesn't really have the explosiveness before his ACL to separate from DBs out when he's split out. Like I said, he's good at using his size. He knows how to post up defenders, and he has good hands, really good hands, good concentration on the ball. So Rodgers did trust him in key situations and would go to him. Right after the catch, like I said, he has the athleticism to attack pursuit angles and get hit seams after the catch, but he's not, as much as he trains with Kittle and jokingly has the same number, tried to have the same hair, he's not the same guy after the catch, because guys like Kittle are just 1 in a million type of players and stuff. Tonyan's kind of more of a guy, like he's going to try to stiff arm you, maybe give you a little shimmy, and he kind of goes down after first contact a lot if you watch his highlights. But still, he's 6'4", 6'5", good wingspan, really good ball skills. Not a blocker. He gives effort, gets in the way, but he's had a couple plays this year. I think one of them was against the Bears where Quinn just took him into Iowa on the play, like it was that bad. So that every player is going to have their limitations, but and it's hard to tell what they're going to do at tight end, because it's one of those where I do see them maybe giving Tonyan some kind of like a 2-year prove-it deal kind of thing, where it's like, hey, we like you, but so his injury was like right before Halloween. It was that Thursday night, the Thursday night game that ended with the Rasul Douglas interception. But so his injury was late October. Everyone says like, oh, guys are coming back in a year. Guys are coming back in less than a year. I don't like to put that on players, because
of course,
every once in a while you have like a Bakhtiari situation where people are like, oh, he'll be back, because guys come back in less than a year, and then everyone was kind of aching and moaning about, and it's like, it's a 300-pound guy who moves laterally all the time, and you're telling him come back from a major knee reconstruction. It's kind of the same with Tonyan, where it's like, he does do, like, how he'll get open is he'll put good head and shoulder fakes into his routes and stuff, and he is good at separating that way. He had a touchdown last year where he got open on a post-stop route where, like, I didn't know what he did on the route because the broadcast angle didn't show it. And
of course,
literally he has the safety on his hip, crosses the goal line, just puts his foot in the ground, and is the safety just falls over. And so
That's good.
like those are the kind of things that you kind of you see that's how he would get open previously, and you're kind of like, okay, like how is that going to be affected by the knee and stuff? So there's a little bit more digging and kind of like you gotta kind of see where he's at, kind of thing and stuff. But I think there's a role for him. It could kind of be what Cook was doing this year, where it's like you need a guy who's going to be the. I don't really say safety valve because that makes it sound like you're just a check down guy.
Of course.
Not that you're the guy whose schemes are being run for. Like that's where like just to put it into kind of focus for fans is like you need a guy where if I land Keenan up over here and I land Mike over here, I have Eckler here. I need someone who's going to attack that real estate in the middle of the field. Cook could still kind of do that. Yes, he had some painful drops this year, but there's still like he is still one of the best to do it in that area of the field. That middle, attack the seam over the dropping cover 2 linebacker. Tonyan is that kind of an athlete. Earlier in the year against San Fran, he got behind Fred Warner on one of those kind of skinny post routes, just to give you an idea of where he wasn't at. I mean, he's one of those. He was a 6'5" receiver when he played in college, kind of thing, and then they moved him over to tight end in the pros. So hopefully, I do want to see him get back because he seems like such a great guy. The joke on him last year was, his name is pronounced ton, like 1 ton. But, he said, he's like, yeah, I let people pronounce it like how it looks like because I'm just some Illinois State nobody. And he's like, so it was funny. So he had the Monday night game against Atlanta in 2020 where he catches 3 touchdown passes and he had, like that was like his 4th or 5th on the season. And he's like, okay, now that I've got this many, I'm going to say my name is pronounced this way. Like I've established myself. But it was really funny. It was really cool and stuff. And Yosh had a similar situation. It's like it's Nyman, it's Dutch and stuff. So all the reports are that Tonyan's a great guy. We know he works hard in the offseason, goes to the tight end skills camps with Kittle, and he and Kittle have a fun romance to follow on Instagram and Twitter and stuff. But there would definitely be a fit there because, like I said, not like the one day like Kevin Falk check down in the old Patriots system where Brady would just hit him like every other play kind of thing. This is a guy, like I said, where you're like, if you're Lombardi, you're Joe Lombardi, you're like, okay, like I'm sending Keenan this way, I'm sending Mike this way, and I'm sending here on a text or something like that.
Right.
There's going to be a void, and I need someone who just has to get there. Tonyan is that guy. He can get there, and he's going to catch the ball like 9 times out of 10 kind of thing. So definitely, it's one of those where like you hate to say it, where like this year, like I was honestly surprised we signed him the way we did this year because I thought someone would throw money at him for the 11 touchdowns in 2020, but kind of stuck around to where he was familiar. He was a restricted free agent, but restricted free agent tenders, teams will just throw money at those guys to see if the other team will blink, kind of thing.
Right.
And Tonyan stayed, and I hope wherever he goes, he gets a chance to maximize his opportunities again. Because, like I said, great guy, and great production when he's in the right pecking order in the call sheet, kind of thing. He's not going to be the guy that's it's rare that there are guys like that, especially at the tight end position. But one of those guys that you're like, oh shoot, yeah, he did catch like 8 to 10 touchdowns this year, kind of thing and stuff. And I think he'd be a guy that could get a lot of good rapport with Herbert there, and just be another big guy that he can trust to kind of go up and get the ball.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, their pass blocking efficiency and run block grade from Pro Football Focus, he's behind Jared Cook in both of those. But I think that's like fine. We don't we're not looking for somebody who is going to be blocking like that. That's what Parham's going to be for. That's what McKitty's going to be for. That's what Steven Anderson's going to be for. Tonyan not as much. So for him to go from for us as Chargers fans to go from 11th in drop rate with Cook to 4th with someone like Tonyan, like you said, someone who can just catch the football. Like if you can just catch the football, Chargers might win one more game last year. And so, to go from, Cook to that, I could work with that. So that sounds pretty good to me. The last thing I do want to get into, I didn't talk to you about doing this yet, but I just we might as well, because everything that's happening with this team, you guys are obviously, well over the cap, and who knows what's going to happen with your team. Who knows if Rodgers is there, Adams, or whoever. Is there one cut candidate on here or that's not on here that you think the Packers could, move on from? And I guess specifically, are there any cut candidates on here that could fit with the Chargers?
Okay, so one of them right off the bat would be okay. So I think honestly, Zadarius Smith has played his last snaps in Green Bay. I joked with Jacob Westendorf, our boss over at Game on Wisconsin. I said that's one of those that you just wait for the book to come out in 10 years and kind of find out what happened there. Like it turned into one of the biggest he said, she said kind of he said kind of things. LaFleur was so fed up with it, he just from really after he got the surgery after week 1, LaFleur was just like, I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about the guys who I have kind of thing. So I think it was kind of like some people were saying, did he fake the injury? I don't think so. I think it was like a Michael Thomas thing where it's like, you told us you got kind of dinged up last year or early, and we told you to get surgery kind of thing and stuff, and didn't try to play through it and all that kind of stuff. So that would, I don't want to even say the home run, but that would be the biggest name probably out of everybody that, hypothetically would be a free agent. You see him used kind of like Melvin Ingram was used, can play on the edge on early downs and then gets reduced inside to like a 3 technique, or we would play him in the A gap every once in a while to trigger on the center and just really mess things up. One of the fun games to watch him do that in is the Minnesota game in I think it was week 16 in the 2019 season. He just totally, and yeah, Minnesota's O-line isn't very good, but just totally wrecked their blocking scheme, and I think he had like 3.5 sacks of Kirk Cousins in that game. So that would be the biggest name. Preston Smith is another one where, another edge defender, had a really nice bounce back season. I think he's a guy that gets kept somehow because from Green Bay's perspective, okay, if you cut both of the Smiths, it's like, okay, you've got Rashawn Gary and a bunch of nobodies, and, gambling that there's an edge you really like at the end of round 1, and maybe you take 2 or 3 of them in the draft, but that's a big ask because you're not getting a free agent. Maybe Whitney Merciless re-signed as like a vet holdover kind of thing and stuff. So the 2 Smiths are up there. One guy who probably won't get talked about a lot, but maybe a cut candidate is Dean Lowry, who had a rough few years in Mike Pettine's scheme for whatever reason. I don't know, because I didn't think Pettine had his D-line gap too much, but for whatever reason, Lowry was getting washed out of run lanes and just didn't have a good last couple of years. He would still have some sack production, but a lot of it was funnel and kind of, plays that were kind of funneled to him, and he was cleanup duty. This year, he looked like the guy that was worthy of the contract extension he got before the 2019 season, where just was beating single blockers. You're seeing him get push in the run and the pass game. And yeah, so he's a guy, so like, right now, Green Bay could save just under $4 million for cutting him, and that's a guy that, there could be something there with them in terms of making a move. The one to kind of keep an eye on that wouldn't be a cut, but would be a potential move is Billy Turner.
Okay,
and he was wise. So, like we kind of went into, they might have options there. They might just say, like, Yosh, you're going to be the right tackle next year, and we're going to figure it out behind you kind of thing. As much as I'd like Turner to stay because he's played really good ball out at right tackle the last 2 seasons, and is a viable option to swing inside at either of the 2 guard spots, they're going to have to find money somewhere. And as much as, everyone tries to say the salary cap isn't real, it's an illusion and all that kind of stuff, there's a point where it gets real.
Yes.
It's not the NBA where you have the slush on the top and the soft cap leading to the luxury tax and all that kind of stuff. There is a hard cap, and as many hoops you can jump through, as many cartwheels you can do with it, there's a limit to what you can do. And so in Turner's case, they can save just under $7.5 million if they were to cut him before June 1st. But if you designate him a post June 1st, that doesn't look right. I think over the caps thing is weird. But yeah, there's ways for them to kind of get out of a little more money if they're to trade him instead of just cutting him and stuff. And make sure they get something back in return for a starting caliber play, like a good, not just a starting caliber, like a
Right.
top upper end starting caliber player at multiple positions. So those are the biggest names that I can see that the Chargers would go after. One guy that we didn't talk about who definitely could be a target that's a free agent is Devondre Campbell. And I don't know what the Chargers' plans are. I really do hope they keep Kazir White because he fits what they do on defense so well. But Campbell is kind of cut from the same cloth where he's a rangy, long linebacker. I think White is a better athlete, but Campbell plays with really good instincts in this system. And like I said, just like with Rasul, you're getting scheme compatibility where you're kind of, you're seeing guys who are going to be kind of used in the same role. That would be a move that if the Chargers signed him, I would not be surprised at all, especially because, like I said, Barry was the linebacker coach underneath or below Staley last year when they were both with the Rams. I know that he would give him showering reviews unless he was blackballing him to make him stay, kind of thing, which I don't think you can do in NFL circles. But that's a name that we didn't go over that I can see as an option for the Chargers.
Okay.
But those would be the biggest name because those are the ones that would actually make some kind of sensible financial shift for the Packers. Those are the four, whether it's by cuts or by trade kind of thing. Those are the moves that I can see done. And realistically, so like I said, I think Za'Darius is gone. I think that's a done deal. They're gonna save a bunch of money if they cut him right away and stuff. I think where it gets kind of interesting is it's gonna be where it's gonna be how the Devontae talks go. That's gonna be the biggest one. Is it's gonna be, are they able to agree with Devontae, or are they gonna have to sign him? Because just to give the crash course on it for a lot of the just the general listeners and stuff is that Green Bay can re-sign Devontae anytime between now and when he signs his next contract with someone else. They have the freedom to do that. Or they can agree, I should say. They can't sign him officially until free agency opens. That said, they've already gone through the motions of saying, we're going to tag you if it comes to that and all that stuff. The problem is that if they tag him, in order for it to be legal, they have to be under the cap with that tag hit included. And that tag hit is going to be $20 million. So that just adds to the hurdles that the team has to jump through. If they do end up having to go that route with Devontae, that's a whole other set of loops that hoops and loops that they have to traverse through to get cap compliant by the 1st of March this year. So those are all things that are going to affect who they can and will sign and stuff. And, like I said, so for example, like from Green Bay's point of view, you're looking at guys like Rasul. You're looking at Rasul as a guy who's going to be like an early free agency sign. Like he's going to sign one of the first couple of days of free agency. Marquez, Dennis Kelly, you're expecting those are guys who are going to linger into the second week after the big names go kind of thing. Those are the guys that always kind of slip through the cracks on the first week. You're like, oh, and then you kind of see them start to get whisked up in the second week of free agency when the team see like, okay, we didn't get the tier A guys. Now let's see who the tier B and C guys are kind of thing and stuff. So those are generally the more economical and if cost-effective signings because free agency, as Andrew Brand says, you're overpaying for everybody, and it's just how much you're overpaying for a guy because you're paying on you're paying either on past you're paying on past performance or you're paying on what you're projecting. An example where the Chargers won out immensely was Casey Hayward, who it's all revisionist history. I don't want to say all, but the majority of Packer fans at the time were like, we have Sam Shields, who's under contract for 3 more seasons. We've got these 2 young guys that we drafted in Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins, who obviously have busted out.
Yes.
It's like, hey, like, we've got a trio. Hayward at the time, and like, I don't take it down because I stand by what I said at the time. I was like, he was a guy who had production but never cleaned up his footwork. And his last year, he was getting roasted whenever he had to play on the perimeter, and I don't know what it was, just a change of scenery, the chip on the shoulder, whatever it was. But I'm glad that he earned what he did when he was with the Chargers. But that's one where I'm like, And then for the Packers, it couldn't have worked out any worse because the first week of the 2016
Yeah.
season, Shields gets a
Shields.
concussion that ends his Packers career. And we're playing Ladarius Gunter against Julio Jones in the NFC Championship game. And a lot of Chargers fans are going, who is that? I was like, he's burnt toast. And that's the simplest explanation of who Ladarius Gunter is. So, I mean, you know, that's kind of where it is. And so, you know, I'd like a lot of these guys to go to the Chargers because it gives me an easy reason to cheer. Even before I married, so my wife is from Oceanside, lifelong Charger fan. Her brother's obviously too. It's fun to be able to root openly for an AFC team and stuff like that. But I always did like the Chargers. Something about those powder blues. Watching Seau and LT play and stuff, it was always fun to play or to watch them play. And yeah, so it makes it really easy to say, like, I can still cheer for you, man. So yeah, those are the kind of things to look for. And yeah, like we're kind of going to just see where the cards fall for us, you know, looking at it from a Packers point of view. So yeah, like I said, I bring all that up because, you know, some people from the kind of like, they label it realist and it's really pessimistic, but it's like, well, why didn't their other team try to re-sign them? It's like, well, we can't because we're waiting for all these other things on the pecking order to fall into place. And we've got to make concessions somewhere to make all of these things happen. So it's like the losses have to come somewhere. So it's not we don't want them. It's we just can't have them all back kind of thing. As much as people say run the band back and the salary cap doesn't matter, there is no, at the end of the day, there is no setting in like Madden where you can just turn it off. Kind of thing. Like, it's always there, and there are, you know, as much as it's not real, there's limitations to it, and it does impact how they do business. Because on the other hand, too, for Green Bay is like everyone's like, oh, just sign it and deal with it later. The problem is that they have contracts coming up for Jair Alexander, Elton Jenkins, Rashawn Gary. Even though he had a bad year, Darnell Savage Jr. So those are 4 key contributors and starters that you're going to have to lock up. So the irony is that Jair's one is actually one they have to do now to lower his cap hit for 2022 to help with everything else. But you know, like, so the last 2 guys, you have the freedom to use the 5th-year option as a buoy for it. With Jenkins, they have to get their action going now because he's going into his 4th year. He's a 2nd-round pick. And you've just got to get that deal done because there's no blanket of restricted free agency. And it's hard to salary tag an O-lineman because I forget what the rules are, but I don't think there's a designation between the positions. I think if you O-line tag someone, I think you tag them as an O-lineman and they get left tackle money, which Jenkins can argue for because he's like, I am your left tackle, you know, I'm your left guard 1, which I do think they're going to do. As long as Bakhtiari's in town, I think they're going to keep the 2 of them next to each other and try to reinforce that, okay, instead of Lindsley, it's Myers now, but you're going to have a really strong left side, and we'll, you know, hopefully find good pieces for the right, but we'll make it work for, you know, for all intents and purposes. And so, but from Jenkins' point of view, it's like, okay, that's fine and dandy, but I'll find some team that's going to pay me to be their left tackle because I know here I'm your left guard 1, but I'm also your left tackle 2, your center 2, your right tackle 2 until, you know, but until further notice. I do think he was going to be right tackle 1. You know, there was a 50-50 chance he was going to open next season as right tackle 1 or left guard 1. So, you know, and going back to the Chargers side, those are all reasons why Green Bay is not going to be able to keep all these guys because in Rasul's case, good corners cost money. Like, even if you are somebody's quarterback 3, they cost money. Backup offensive line depth, that's the one where, like, Kelly, I could see staying, but at the same time, like I said, it's hard for them in a year where they're trying to be fiscally responsible to keep a guy who literally is the backup at 1 position. Right. That's where it kind of gets hard for them to justify it. Whereas, like the Chargers, you'd be signing him to be your starting right tackle. And then Marquez, I think they kind of have to because you know what you got there, but it's like there's so many bigger moves you have to make ahead of that. So that's kind of where the limitation comes there. And then with Tonyan kind of falls into a similar space as Marquez. And then you also have the injury where it's kind of hard to tell if that helps Green Bay retain him or hurts Green Bay in retaining him because some other team is able to say, like, you know what, no, that deal Green Bay was going to give you, we're going to up it and we're going to pay you to rehab here and be a part of our future. So that's kind of it, looking at it from a big picture and looking down. But like I said, whichever ones we can keep, I do hope they go to the Chargers so that I can just keep cheering them on and hoping them success in their future career.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, you covered everything absolutely possible. I don't think anyone could have done a better job of previewing these free agents. I hope one does sign with the Chargers, so you didn't spend the last hour and 15 minutes talking about guys that don't end up with the Chargers. But no, it was incredible. I really, really appreciate it, Mike. Thank you so much. What are
Yeah,
you up
no
to these
problem.
days with Game On Wisconsin? What are you up to? Are you posting anything recently? Kind of taking a break between now and free agency?
Nothing yet. Because mostly, so what I do at Game On is I'm mostly the like breaking. I help with the team's breaking news. So, we kind of split up the duties. I'm the sort of like the second in command guy over there in that regard. So, I use the fact that I'm so far behind in terms of time difference to catch a lot of the like straggling information, but also
Nice.
try to catch a lot of the coach pressers and practice updates and stuff like that. So that's where you'll see a lot of my name attached to a lot. And then I will be helping with their draft previews and stuff like that. So,
Cool.
but that's all kind of coming in the works. But that'll be the next thing that I'll be really be working on for them.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'm sure you love listening to all of that. I don't know how much of that you listen to. I'll put in some timestamps so you guys can jump around. Make sure to follow Mike at Kawano Mike on the screen. It says at Kawano Mike. He's a great follow. You know, I think if I were to list guys that I appreciate following, interacting with the most, Mike's definitely one of them. Just a nice dude, always there for be supportive of everybody, is a nice person to follow, and is obviously very knowledgeable. I don't think anyone could have. I don't think I could have talked about the Chargers as much as you just did about the Packers.
No,
So
no, no.
obviously,
Don't sell yourself short. I know you got it.
no,
Appreciate it, but no, no,
I don't
it's
know.
honestly more than anything. I just really love to talk football.
Hmm.
It that's the thing too is like I talk to you, Steven, or Alex. I think
Sure.
even though we're coming from different fan bases, even though I do have a rooting interest, I think more than anything, I think we get along so well, even though we've never met in person, because it's like we're just here to talk football, and there's so
Exactly.
many little things that we can go over, and I know we poke fun about things and things like that, but it's like there's just so easy to get into it, and I appreciate the kind words and stuff, but honestly, all it is, I'm just here to talk football and always happy to, and yeah, like um whether it's Chargers stuff. I can't say I'm the most plugged in, but I'm more just there because I'm like watching with my wife or watching for my wife because um, she is that type of fan, like that Bud Light commercial with the guy who's like, I'm going to hide in the cellar because that's when my team wins. So I'm doing a lot of the watching and trying
Nice.
to console her or be celebratory of her and stuff. So no, like it's one of those where yeah, like I know people are like, oh, like how do you have these conversations? I'm like, just here to talk football and like, like as much as I think I know, none of us know what the play call is. None of us know what an individual responsibility is. We can only put our best foot forward and compare notes and kind of thing. And that's just the kick I get out of it is like getting to have those next level talks about it and kind of give our thoughts, but also to see like what everyone else thinks and kind of compare notes and just kind of see what we think and hey, it's a buzz when you do get something right. That's kind of the thing that I joke about with Rashawn is like I haven't needed a draft pick to be right more in my life, being a Michigan alum and fan and being a Green Bay
Right.
Packer fan. So, having that pride of like, yeah, like that's my guy kind of thing. So
Nice.
yeah, it's like, as much as like if you see my tweets about Marquez or Yosh Nijman and stuff, I have so many more about guys that didn't pan out and stuff. Like it's just the nature of the business. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to themselves or to you. So yeah, like feel free to hit me up. I'm always happy to talk. Because of time difference, it may be a little late. I'm not ignoring you. So yeah, um, thanks so much for having me on, Tyler. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, anytime in the future, if we have into one of these areas where it's like free agents who look enticing for either of our teams, I'd be more than happy to chat it over and stuff. But thank you so much for having me on. I love listening to your guys' show.
Appreciate it.
It's always a great way to get insight into Chargers point of view, and yeah, you guys are all great follows on Twitter. I really appreciate the coverage you guys provide, all the insight. Um, hope that your guys' following keeps going, because you guys put out a really good product, really good coverage, really good product, both across your podcast and across your Twitter feeds. So keep up the great work. You guys are going places. I truly believe that.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that. Yeah, please definitely follow Mike. We'll certainly have you on in the future. Hey, if they make the AFC or the Super Bowl and the Packers play the Chargers, we'll definitely have you on in a couple of years. I know the Packers and the Chargers will play again, so we'll obviously have you on at that point. But I really appreciate it. So everyone, make sure to give Mike a follow. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, bolt up.